संस्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्म स्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. So we continue from where we left off. It's been a while when we last discussed about the great master, because of the two events that I had to attend in Germany and Netherlands. So the previous class was Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and as usual, we have the alternate Great Master class on the Great Master by Swami Sarvasthananda, because as I mentioned several times, that it's difficult to understand the message of anyone, any great avatar or personality or saint, if you disconnect it from his own life. Very often the life itself is a message, because they live the message that they give to the world. So they are 100% true to themselves, and also the benefit that people get by reading the lives is as much as the benefit they get by trying to understand his message as we get from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So the point that we were discussing, we saw in the beginning of the second part of Sri Ramakrishna's life. This has been divided into 5 parts for convenience. And Swami Sarvasthananda believed that the life of Sri Ramakrishna can be best understood by dividing it into 5 different phases. First is the Balya Leela, or the childhood. That's how the life story of all the different incarnations are biographies of different incarnations like Rama and Krishna. You'll often find that there are many stories which concern or which are concerned with the divinity, or which which show us how the divinity was manifest right from childhood. So we discussed that volume, or that volume is almost over now. We are coming to the second volume, which is unique. And I repeat it because in the lives of most of the incarnations, including Jesus and Buddha, Bhagwan Buddha, there is lot, you can get quite, the details of his childhood in great detail in all these incarnations. Krishna's childhood, for example, we know so many things. So also we know the Krishna who was involved in the Mahabharata war, as the messenger of Gita, Bhagavad Gita, and also in Bhagavata there are many stories, both of his younger days as well as the later life. But somehow the sadhana, part of sadhana, how they performed the spiritual practices. You see, because as we discussed in our previous class, when incarnations take the human form, they just behave exactly like humans. Of course, they are not bound like human beings. They are not bound by Maya. But at the same time, they have to genuinely perform sadhana to set an example to the world. That is the meaning of the word avatara. Avatarana means to come down from the divine state and become as intensely human as they can, so that human beings get some inspiration, and based on that inspiration, the devotees or the followers or maybe even admirers can benefit a lot by following their example. So that is the reason why Swami Sarvasthananda says they take on the human imperfections, not because they are imperfect, but because these imperfections are present in the human being, in the jiva. So there is a very popular song in Gujarati addressed to the Lord Krishna, or addressed to the incarnations, where Narsimha Mehta says, even though he's Shiva, he's acting or playing the role of a Jiva. That's the idea. So that's why we worship. So as Sri Ramakrishna said, Shiva Jnane Jiva Seva. With the knowledge that one is divine, we worship the Jiva. We see the Jivahood because we are Jivas ourselves. But for a person, for an incarnation, everything is filled with the Lord, as the Ishopanishad says. But why then why then has to take heed? Why is it necessary for the incarnations to take on these human imperfections? The reason Swami Shardanji says that assuming the human bodies and living like human beings, avatars to a great extent, they experience our short-sightedness, the ignorance that we have, and the limited knowledge that we share with the entire humanity. We have limited knowledge, and the incarnations have been born to show us what infinite knowledge, what unlimited knowledge, pure knowledge, or pure consciousness is. So if they are already, even if they are born with born perfect, they assume imperfection, at least in the gross body, and also to a certain extent in their minds, so that like us, they will show how one can struggle to discover a path of liberation, path towards liberation, in spite of the limitations. So that's one of the reasons why Swami Shardanji takes so much of pain by, obviously, when Sri Ramakrishna did sadhana, when he performed his spiritual practices, he was not there. They all came towards the end of his life. The first half of his life was spent in sadhana, which was known to some intimate disciples like Hriday and others who were always with him. They have seen every aspect of the master's sadhana. And some of them, though they were aged, they were still living in Dakshineshwar. So Swami Shardananji consulted all these people, and from these devotees and these admirers, and some of them were great spiritual personalities themselves, he got a lot of information. Because he felt, as he discusses in the introduction to the second part of Lila Prasanga, which we are now discussing, that most of the admirers and devotees and followers of different incarnations deliberately try to hide these imperfections, or the fact that even they had to do sadhana. We do not know what sadhana Christ did. We just see him struggling. There is a missing portion in his life where they say that he did sadhana, perhaps he went on the top of a mountain. But what kind of sadhana, what kind of struggles did he undergo? The same thing with Buddha. We get the wonderful message of Buddha after he attained realization. But what was the struggle? How did he struggle? That perhaps the devotees or the followers, they feel, if we discuss these imperfections, then people will lose faith. But Swami Shardanji says, to the contrary, the faith will increase, because these avatars, they have deliberately come for the purpose of setting an example to people with limited minds, limited ideas, limited knowledge, the short-sightedness that we have. So the awareness of the divine nature, though it is manifest now and then, right from childhood, if you see, Sri Ramakrishna's divine nature was revealed. Maybe it is a simple incident where he saw the flock of white cranes against the backdrop of clouds, grey clouds, dark clouds on a rainy monsoon day. And he suddenly goes into samadhi. Though there are hundreds of such incidents, on Shivratri day, he loses himself in the idea of the greatness of Shiva. So all these things, though there are occasional glimpses of the divine nature, their divine nature, which has been exaggerated to a large extent in the other lives of other biographies. We can't blame the followers because they will emphasize those things. They want to show. It's not the fault of the disciples. They just want to show that right from the day the incarnation was born, or the child Krishna was born, or child Rama was born, everything about him was divine. So he practically, if they show that he also had to undergo human struggle, then perhaps the faith in that deity or the faith in that avatar will lessen. So deliberately or maybe unconsciously, they did not discuss those things. So most of the biographies, according to Shardananji, have this defect in the sense they just avoid, they jump from the childhood of the prophet or incarnation to the state where he starts blessing everyone, starts distributing his divine knowledge, and he becomes a prophet. The conversion process has been deliberately or otherwise hidden. So, for the good of many, he says, uh, the incarnation willingly accepts. This is a very important fact. We don't willingly, we it is because of our karma that the wheel of Maya and ignorance is covering us. But for them, they have willingly accepted it, and they seem to grope in the path of this play of light and darkness. Sometimes there is light, sometimes there is divine revelation, sometimes there is this darkness, this ignorance. And then maybe we think, when many of the devotees of Sri Ramakrishna saw that he was suffering from cancer, and now and then he used to tell them, see, I have so much of pain. Even the doctor thought he was a good human being, but I don't accept what these devotees, he said, you are spoiling his head by calling him a guru and all those things. He is, after all, a human being. I am his doctor, I am treating him. And he was, but one thing that attracted him was his purity, his childlike nature. He says he's a wonderful human being, but don't give me all these stories about the divinity and incarnation. And Sri Ramakrishna was happy with that, because he did not want to disturb the faith of Dr. Sarkar, who, as a doctor, just came to him, came to treat his body. So there is very little chance that he would understand the higher aspects of human personality, especially that of an incarnation. So one thing which he observed, which Dr. Sarkar observed, and which Swami Shardananda also observes, that these people, so that's why Swami Vivekananda defined the spirituality by absence of desire or absence of any selfish desire. That is one thing which these incarnations, whether it is Buddha, Krishna, Rama, or any other incarnation, they are definitely, they do not have selfish desires like human beings have. And that Dr. Sarkar accepted. He could see how much Sri Ramakrishna is struggling in spite of his pain in his throat, and how it is physically impossible to maintain one's sanity, to maintain one's mental balance, and also deal with the problems of all the disciples, till, as Buddha also did, till the last day, even when he was on sick bed, the disciples were preventing people from going to him. But we see in the life of Buddha, he tells Ananda, let him come. If somebody has come, at least I can be of some service to him. I can share some of the wonderful revelations or the wonderful things that I have discovered through my sadhana. So this absence of the least trace of selfish desire is very prominent. But otherwise, they are just like human beings. They focus all the energy in one direction, that is how to uplift humanity, not only by showing how to lead a life of discipline, a life of sadhana, but also impart some of the, or share some of the spiritual energy which they have acquired by Herculean sadhana. It's not that they got it just like that. If you see the austerities that even Buddha did, how much of tapasya did he do? It's not that he just got enlightenment in a day. Even he had to struggle. And then he was keen. The second part of the incarnation's life is normally spent in distributing this wonderful treasure that they have acquired by hard sadhana, and how they solved their life's problems, and how they became an object lesson for humanity. And then the second part of their life, that is the Guru Bhav, the other 3 volumes, the 2 volumes on Guru Bhava, how he became a world teacher, how he taught each individual disciple, how he understood their problems, how he could guide them separately, because they had different natures, and how he could have this wonderful insight. So Swami Shardanji says they do good to humanity after having undergone the struggle that they anticipate their disciples would undergo, and then they share the experience. So many times you will find Sri Ramakrishna in the gospel, somebody has come and he has lost his dear son or maybe his grandson, and he is weeping. And so Sri Ramakrishna in the initial stages, you will see, he also starts to weep as if he has lost his own relative. So the person who has come, he thinks, okay, I mean, he doesn't give a sermon on saying that these are all attachments are not good, you should detach. They are very good, but when a person really suffers, they empathize with those people. He empathized with him. And then slowly, when a little bit of sorrow was seen to diminish, then he would give him some advice. Otherwise, if he, when he comes with so much of sorrow, that person is not in a position even to understand. Leave alone Vedanta, you cannot speak spirituality to a person who is actually experiencing that suffering. So he has to partake of that, or at least show that I am also human, I also struggled, I also did all these things. And he even in fact tells, when Akshay, my nephew died, I felt as if, I felt so much in the beginning, I was in the mood of a Jnani. He was in a mood of a Jnani. He said, what is there? Only the body has fallen. The spirit has gone back to its source. But after a while, when his human side, he came to the level of a human being, intensely wept. So also you see in the Ramayana, in the beginning, you'll see a person, an incarnation himself wept when he found that Sita was missing. And then you see the Valmiki Ramayana. You will find a description of all the human emotions that Sri Rama expresses. In so many verses, Valmiki explains how he felt desolate, how he felt that, how he missed Sita when she was abducted. So all the human qualities should be discussed, because without regarding a human being as a human, I mean, without regarding an avatar as a human being, we cannot make any sense, or we cannot derive, the sadhakas or the followers cannot derive any benefit from his life and actions. So whether we read the gospel or whether we read the great master, we have to understand this point. That is why Swami Shardananji takes so much of pain to explain that I am deliberately discussing the sadhana with all its imperfections, without hiding anything. It is a biography which is very truthful. As we all know, Mahatma Gandhi wrote a foreword to his life. Though he had different views as far as visions are concerned, but he somehow found that this is a search for truth. At least he agreed on this point, that though he knew very little of mysticism, which Sri Ramakrishna's divine visions and many things happened in his life. Many of these things he himself said that since I don't know, since I have not experienced these visions, I cannot vouch for them. But at the same time, Gandhi was honest to admit that whatever he has read, whatever the biographers have put together, if one central theme comes out of this discussion, that he was truthful in thought, word, and deed. Every action of Sri Ramakrishna, not only his life and his actions, but every word that he spoke was full of experience. Without having that feeling, Gandhi's biographer Vincent Shawn, he writes that I doubt if Gandhi could be forced to write a biography of any personality, because unless he believed that it was 100% truth, he would not even agree to write a foreword to his biography. And he wrote a beautiful foreword where again and again it is quoted that Sri Ramakrishna's life is a life that teaches you to see God face to face. So that feeling, intense feeling, that whatever we find in Sri Ramakrishna's life is something that is absolutely truthful. There was nothing, no effort to hide. Even Swami Shardananji says, he says, we request the reader, I'll just read what he says. He says, Sri Ramakrishna actually admitted his human imperfections. So that is why we are discussing his human aspect, because we know it will benefit the reader. That is why we request the reader, he writes, to study the master's divine aspect while always keeping in mind his human characteristics. If we do not think of him as one of us, we shall not be able to find meaning in the superhuman zeal he had and the effort he made at the time of his sadhana, spiritual disciplines. We may think, why would he who is eternally perfect need to try to attain truth? By birth, he is divine. That is what we consider our incarnations to be. Again, we may think his lifelong effort was nothing but a matter of show. That is another theory. If you see some of the biographies, especially Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's biography, everywhere they will say, the biographers, with all their good intentions, they will say it's just a leela. Every time he is doing some kind of play acting. Like actors play their roles. They may be different people at home, but when they are on stage, they have to act. So if you say if it is mere acting, then also people cannot learn the lesson. That is what Sardhanji says. We may think that his lifelong, he was perfect, but he deliberately played out a drama, a role in which he showed his imperfections. That would be wrong. He should be truthful. So that is why he says his lifelong effort was nothing but a matter of show. Like some people may like to think. That is not all. He says some people may also feel that his effort, his steadfastness, his renunciation, which applied in his life for God realization, may cause terrible apathy in our hearts instead of encouraging us to emulate them. If we think it is just a show, if it is just a play acting, we don't take movies seriously. Whatever we see, maybe we weep, we laugh, and we participate as long as we are in the theater. But when we come out, we are our normal selves. If their lives are just play acting, if they have come just to act out the drama, as some disciples would like to describe the life of their incarnations or their ishtas or favorite prophets, because they don't want to even mention that there is an iota of imperfection in their incarnation. They are 100% perfect. So how to explain the imperfections? They say that it's just a drama, it's a leela. But Swami Shardananji here, the biographer, he says, no, that is not true. He is not play acting. Otherwise, this Herculean, his effort that he did, that will not motivate. Every time if you think that Sri Ramakrishna was perfect, he's just acting, then you don't get any inspiration. If you see somebody struggling like us, then we get inspiration from that personality. So it's definitely necessary for the sadhakas or the followers of any prophet or any avatara to think that they also assume these in reality, they assume these human limitations to inspire in us a level of energy which will make us feel that if Sri Ramakrishna could do, as he himself said, I have done 16 annas, you do just one anna, that would be sufficient. Maybe we cannot match the Herculean renunciation, the Herculean desire, steadfastness, and the other spiritual qualities, 100%, but at least a small percentage, even if we do, he said it is sufficient. So, and Swami Shardanji says, if we are somehow convinced, or if somebody tries to convince us repeatedly that this is just play acting, instead of encouraging us, it may depress us. He said the Lord has, in fact, some of the wonderful songs which some of the great Kali sadhakas, because there are a lot of songs which Sri Ramakrishna used to sing. In some of those immature sadhakas in their, I mean, when they were immature, when they were just beginning their sadhana, sometimes they scolded the mother, the divine mother, saying that you are cheating me, perhaps you are cheating me, you really don't exist. You see some of this like Kamala, Kanta, Ram Prasad and all, some of their earlier songs, when they were still full of doubt, they didn't have the realization or experience of God. When they were still struggling, doubt came to their minds. They were intensely human, and then sometimes they used to get frustrated that do you really exist? If you really exist, then why these things? Why I am not able to see you? Why I am not able to get any kind of God experience? So that Swami Shardanji says that if it is just, if we consider or if we interpret their lives to be just play acting, then we'll think that he's just conducting the incarnations are just conducting a sort of drama, or there is a better word for it. We can also call it Leela. But Leela, if we want to understand the real meaning, in fact, the name of this book is Sri Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga. Leela and drama are totally different. It's not play acting. Leela means it is the human Leela, the role which an incarnation plays as a human being just like us, in flesh and blood, with all the sufferings and all the defects that a human being has. Now, what is the reason that there's another danger? Now, Swami Shardananji is so nicely discussed this aspect, the human aspect, but at the same time, he says, an ignorant person goes to the other extreme. He thinks Sri Ramakrishna is only human. So he says, although we long for the Master's grace, that is Sri Ramakrishna's grace, we nonetheless must also accept him as a person endowed with human feelings as ours. So that is what we discussed now. Because he is sympathetic to our misery, the Master has come forward to remove these sufferings of ours. And therefore, from whatever angle we look at his life, from the perspective of a divine personality or a human personality, whatever maybe our interpretation or our idea of the divine being whom we are worshipping, we cannot help but to consider him as a human being as ourselves. So, in fact, till we become free, he says, Shardanji says, till we ourselves become free. There is a beautiful mantra or beautiful concept when we do puja. Many people have so much of affinity for this ritual puja. But as the people who designed this puja, they say it is so difficult to do puja because Devam Bhutva Devam Yajet. That is one of the central principles. One has to completely convert oneself. So that is why you find almost half the puja or even 60% of the puja mantras are just to remove all impurity. Means you have to become so pure even before thinking that you can do puja. So you have to become Deva yourself. Devam Bhutva Devam Yajet. Mane, having become God himself, having become divine, and through various mantras, through various chants and other things and various rituals, we spend a lot of time. That is why worship should not be taken lightly. The worship has to be one, unless one gets that minimum amount of purity. Says, Swami Shardanji is quoting that, unless we become free from bondage and establish ourselves temporarily, at least in our divine nature, we should not do puja. We must think of God and accept God. By becoming God, one should one worship him. So that shows how difficult. That is why when Sri Ramakrishna worshipped, it was not just an image that he worshipped. Otherwise, what was the difference between him and an ordinary pujari? So many thousands of years puja is being done. But when he did puja, he really felt divine. That is why sometimes people misunderstood him. Sometimes he would keep the flowers on his own head. and worship himself, because he did not feel any distinction between the God whom he was worshipping and himself. So by becoming God, he says, we have to remember this, only then we should worship him. By becoming God, Devam Bhutva Devam Yajet. Yajet means to worship. So once you have reached that state, that is, in this case, he says the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, only then you will understand who Sri Ramakrishna is, the true nature. Till then, depending on what stage of life you are, you will consider God, you will bring him down, and that is the role of God. We will bring him down to the human level, because we are feeling ourselves as intensely human, intense, selfish desires. So we attribute those qualities on God. If I want money, I'll pray to God and think that my God will give me money or give me this or that, because that is what my estimate of myself is a person who wants all this worldly success. So we expect the God to do exactly what we want. So if we think that we are divine, then Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Shardanji says, till one reaches Nirvikalpa Samadhi, his worship will be imperfect. We will be able to worship him properly and understand the true nature of God only when we have attained to that kind of divinity. So that shows that how difficult it is to truly worship. We can worship at our level. Definitely we have to begin at some point and then go. But as we grow, the need for feeling the divinity within will be more and more as we understand God more and more, as we understand our Ishta, as we understand. That is why he says, with the human aspect, you also have to focus on the divine aspect as well. Until you have achieved that state, your worship is simply an incomplete attempt to ascend to that divine plane. You will naturally consider God and the creator of the universe to be just a person endowed with extraordinary powers who will just do some favors whenever whenever I want something, whenever. That's a kind of business type of attitude with God. Till then, your worship will be there. You will be still worshipping him, but that worship will not be perfect. So then what is the purpose? He comes to the next point. If God assumes a human form and performs all the sadhana, as we see the wonderful life of Sri Ramakrishna. Now we are just coming to the introduction of sadhaka bhava. All the sadhanas that he did, all the struggles that he underwent, to study that and to understand how difficult it is, or how committed we should be, how serious we should be when we do sadhana, is the main purpose according to Sardanji. So he says, he has given the subheading here, God assumes a human form out of compassion. It is therefore beneficial to study an avatara's life, not just his message. Sometimes people feel, why should we study the life in so much detail? The gospel is so interesting and very easy to understand, or maybe very easy to read. It makes very easy reading. So why not just read the gospels? We will learn wonderful messages, stories we hear. But here it's so complicated. Swami Shardanji is assuming the role of like a lawyer is arguing. It's just like discussing all the pros and cons of a particular subject and going so deep. Why should we tax our brains and mind? We want some kind of easy reading, which of course gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, if you see, it makes very easy reading. Things appear to be so simple. But Shardanji says, it is more important to study the avatara's life if we really want to understand the message. So they have to be always studied together. You cannot say that I'll first study the gospel and then I will read the great master. They have to be, that's why we take this alternate class. Without the great master, which is one of the most authentic biographies, the reading of gospel will be not completely useless, but less useful. Whereas if you leave out the gospel and read only the great master, that also will not help. Because whatever Swami Shardanji discusses He obviously does not discuss all the wonderful parables, wonderful teachings which he finds in the gospel, because he assumes that the reader who comes to Sri Ramakrishna's life is a serious type of person who is not just curious to know about Ramakrishna, but he really wants to understand in depth and try to establish himself in that divinity which will enable him to understand Sri Ramakrishna better. Like he says, very rare is a person who can be established in the divine as Sri Ramakrishna. So if we attain to that state, of course, we will understand Sri Ramakrishna 100%. But obviously, none of us have attained to that state or can even hope to attain that state before we die. So then does that mean that we can never perform the worship of God? If one has to become divine before worshipping God, then why should I worship at all? Whose real form is beyond Maya. So if I get rid of Maya, then why do I need to worship? I worship because I am weak. Weak aspirants like ourselves. Swami Shardanji is classifying himself as a weak aspirant. So you can imagine where our status would be. Weak aspirants like ourselves are still very far from that divine state. That is why, out of compassion for ordinary people like us, and to accept our imperfect worship, see, this is very important. God descends to the human plane and assumes a human body with human feelings. We have a great opportunity, we have a greater opportunity, the author writes, to discuss the history of Sri Ramakrishna sadhana than that of the earlier avatars. Here he will now discuss why, historically speaking, discussion on Sri Ramakrishna sadhana is much more easy, and why, because of that, it is easier to understand what divinity is, to understand what his message is. He says, it is easier. He says we have a greater opportunity to discuss the history of Sri Ramakrishna sadhana than that of the earlier avatars. From time to time, the master himself told us detailed stories of his life during sadhana, because none of the disciples, except Holy Mother and many others who were present when this biography was written, were present to listen from Sri Ramakrishna. Whatever little time they spent, they got instructions. You see in the gospel, you will find all the householder and the monastic disciples coming. They were hardly any time to ask in detail, and they were so bothered about their own relationship with Sri Ramakrishna and the sadhana instructions that he gave, that none of them thought that they should ask him about his struggles. They were not only not close enough, but they didn't have the time. Though they were close enough, they could have asked, but it was hardly 4 years. From 82, the disciples started coming in. 86, August, he passed away. So there was very little time. So many things happened. Each of the disciples were struggling with their own lives. So many crises in their homes. So many. If you see Naren, he hardly got time even to visit Sri Ramakrishna. So he says, out of compassion, he says, from time to time, whatever opportunity Swami Shardananda and others got, and they compared notes with each other before he shared it in this great master or the Leela Prasanga, that time to time he used to tell many wonderful things of the past, of his own sadhana, which were not, these disciples were not witness. So maybe Hriday might have given some ideas or some information about his sadhana, but many things, according to them, if Sri Ramakrishna tells something, it is more authentic than a third person who may not have understood properly. So he says, most of the incidents that he is mentioning in this sadhana, sadhak bhava, has been verified, because most of them were told by the master. From time to time, the master himself told us detailed stories of his life during sadhana, imprinting those vivid pictures. See, it was intentional. He knew at some stage of their lives, these disciples will encounter similar problems. So it's not that all was recorded. Everything that was said to these disciples, you will find in their biographies, because they are not in the gospel. During the gospel, very rarely these monastic disciples would be present. So there are many more facts or many more incidents where Sri Ramakrishna would call these disciples separately, which was not recorded, but the reminiscences of Swami Vivekananda and all the other disciples and also Holy Mother, they add, there's a vast literature where, that's why those wonderful books by Chaitananandji who converted, who translated from Bengali, because most of the reminiscences were recorded in Bengali. So what he did was, God lived with them, they lived with God. All these books are wonderful accounts of these disciples, many of which we will not find in the gospel. So the message is conveyed through successive disciples. Many of them have seen him, many of them may not have seen him, Sri Ramakrishna, but they had wonderful visions and experiences which also they have recorded. They also should be considered as authentic information. So he says, before, even during our lifetime, he says, Sri Ramakrishna used to single out some disciples, and knowing fully well that they are recording something, through his will, he used to tell some aspects of his sadhana. Even in the gospel, we will find that he's saying, I used to do like this, I used to do like that. How did I struggle? When somebody came with a problem, he used to say, I also faced a similar problem. This is how I solved it. So the various events, he says, Swami Shardanji says, what is the source of his information? How authentic it is. He says, shortly before we came to him, people, various events of his life as an aspirant, as a sadhaka, had been observed by people associated with the Kali temple of Dakshineshwar, because that is where he did most of his sadhana, either in Panchavati or in his the premises of the Dakshineshwar temple. Many of them were still present when we arrived there. Many of them were still alive, not that they had gone. We therefore had an opportunity to hear some of those stories directly from these witnesses. However, before we narrate these stories, it is important to describe in a general way the basic principles of sadhana. Now, after having said this, even to understand Sri Ramakrishna's sadhana, you should know what sadhana is according to Vedanta, or according to a synthesis of all the Indian systems of sadhana, that is Vedanta, the Tantras, the Puranas, and the different systems, the yoga system, the Sankhya yoga. There are so many paths, as the Gita enumerates. In fact, the Gita says there are 18 paths. Each chapter is a yoga, is a pathway to feel divinity or realize that divinity. So spiritual aspirant, and what is spiritual aspirant, or what is a spiritual discipline. So if we want to understand Sri Ramakrishna by hearing his various stories as they have been recorded, either heard from people who have themselves witnessed or witnessed by Swami Shardananji himself. So if we want to understand Sri Ramakrishna as a spiritual aspirant, we must first understand what sadhana is in a general way, not specific way, as Sri Ramakrishna. First, try to find out what does sadhana do and why is it necessary. Should we really embark upon a journey, spiritual journey? If at all we have to embark upon a spiritual journey, we have to understand what sadhana is. It is just like somebody wants to take up a particular course of study. He should have a general knowledge, if not complete knowledge, of what that course has to offer, what it will do to us, and what are the possibilities. As we discuss in the our discussion, alternate discussion on Saturday, Vedanta and the science of human possibilities. The reason why we discuss is Vedanta speaks of different possibilities. It does not say that physical possibilities are not there. We want to exist, we want healthy bodies, we want a healthy mind. So all the psychological needs, physical needs, they are all graded needs. There is a hierarchy of needs which explores different possibilities a human being can uh, develop in his own personality. He can develop his body, he can develop his mind, he can develop his health, he can develop his mental health. Psychologically, he can be a very sound person. So these different possibilities have to be examined. So when I do sadhana, or when I say I do sadhana, or when I want to know what spiritual sadhana is, first, or what Sri Ramakrishna's sadhana is, we have to find out what sadhana is in general, and then see how Sri Ramakrishna applied those principles in his own life. He says some readers may comment, especially readers from India. He's not speaking of the Western who can be new to these ideas. He says some readers may comment that the people of India, that's why they say we are so lucky to be born in India, are always practicing sadhana in some form or the other. This is referring to the generation of those days. Perhaps Swami Sarvasthananda is not referring to the present generation in India, which is totally different. I mean, if not drastically different, it's quite different. But in those days, it was assumed that the tradition or the grandparents and the parents would give some sort of sadhana through their Kula Gurus, and something of the other would be performed. Whether even if they did mechanically, they would do it. So he says, he anticipates this problem. So what is there to discuss about sadhana? I have been told by my grandfather was doing this, my father was doing this, I am just following him. These traditions are in our family. Some people even boast that my father, he belonged to this lineage and that. So to address their problems or address the need for even such people who belong to this tradition, but they might not have understood the real spirit of sadhana. They are doing it because their ancestors are doing it. And then for that reason, one need not feel proud. That is what he says. If we think in India we are already doing sadhana, some form or the other, we take it for granted. In fact, people who come new to this, they come with a deep sense of inquiry or curiosity. People who are not exposed, because they want to know, oh, this is something our culture doesn't have, we miss it. So they take it more seriously. Whereas very often it happens, familiarity, they say, if we are familiar with certain things, we take it for granted. Oh, we are Indians, we know this. This is all very familiar. We are far superior. That kind of false superiority comes. So he's addressing this issue here. He says, why to discuss about sadhana? Just come directly discuss Sri Ramakrishna's unique life. Why discuss about sadhana? These are things which we know from childhood. He says, why are we making, I mean, he's anticipating the reader's question. Sadhanji says, why are you making this book longer by raising this topic and wasting time? From time immemorial, Indians have spent most of their energy in the quest for direct experience of the spiritual truths which they have heard from their forefathers. Is there any other country that can make this claim? So this kind of self-pride comes, it creeps in. Is there any other country in which so many avatars and knowers of Brahman have been born? It's true. Since we are so familiar, now this is the argument given by people who think they know everything. They say, since we are so familiar with this topic of sadhana, it should be unnecessary for you to recapitulate here the basic principles of the subject. So see, Sardanji is so particular that he wants to make it clear from the outset, I am not wasting your time or my time by discussing this topic, which we think we have understood, but we have understood very little. So he starts with the erroneous conception of sadhana. What sadhana is not. One of our very senior Swamis, if he was given a topic to speak on, he would first say what that topic is, what is not that. I mean, suppose there is a topic of sadhana, what sadhana is not, he will first say. To rule out, because we don't have to discuss all those things. What sadhana is not, this point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. And then what sadhana is, then it becomes very easy. Because if you rule out, there is a wonderful philosopher, I forgot his name. Uh, he 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 used this logical principle that if we remove all the unnecessary things, then it becomes easy to focus on the essential things. So I just don't recollect the name of that philosopher. Anyway, his principle is that you just go on weeding out things that you don't need. You remove the clutter from your room, then you find that with less things, you can focus and do your job better. So it's like decluttering our mind. So first, if you declutter your mind, then it becomes easy to focus on the essentials of sadhana. So he first discusses what are the erroneous conceptions, fantastic conceptions about sadhana, what sadhana will do to us and what sadhana should we follow. All those things, he first spent some time to discuss that before discussing what sadhana is. So first comes the chapter or the paragraph where he says what sadhana is not, what it is not. So he says, although what has been said above is true, what he said discussed till now, it is still necessary to discuss sadhana because many people have very strange ideas about it. Losing sight of the goal of sadhana, some people consider it to be mere physical mortification, that is doing some kind of tapasya, denial of certain things. So fasting, people go to the extent of denying many things. They just think that by doing this, we are getting some kind of spiritual merit. So they think, the erroneous concepts, those who have, they think that it's a mere physical mortification if you do, or torture your body, as some of the cultures it is there. The more you not torture physically, but deny the body many things, then you will be doing some kind of sadhana. So it's not mere physical mortification, though he says it's not that it is not important, but if you go out of if you do anything in excess, that is bad. Or some people think it is the performance of elaborate rituals that require one to collect rare objects and assemble them and do those rituals perfectly. Even it is not that. Or it is not just control of breath, as some of the systems of spiritual discipline, they give a lot of emphasis on this pranayama and other things. It is not even control of breath or even strange activities which lead to deranged minds. So it's very particular that the first thing you have to assure that the person who does sadhana should have a very sane mind. That is very important. Eccentricity in the name of spirituality cannot be tolerated. One cannot be eccentric. One has to be perfectly normal because there is nothing abnormal in sadhana. So some of the strange activities which are seen in some deranged minds is not sadhana. So what is not sadhana? The performance of rituals where you go on collecting elaborate things. Oh, you miss this, then you are gone, your puja is gone. There are people, they go on increasing this paraphernalia. So when people saw Sri Ramakrishna sadhana, they were shocked. He's not doing. They in fact went and complained to Mathur Babu. What kind of worship he's doing? He's not following any of the vidhis which our priests have done. Through centuries, we have evolved a very great amount of system, and even if one thing is missing, they will find. And Sri Ramakrishna's worship was direct approach. He would approach the Divine Mother as if he is a son, and he would talk to and behave with her as a son, and not out of any fear that I have not done this. Others were criticizing him, and they even went and see what kind of puja this Gadadhar is doing. I mean, Sri Ramakrishna is doing. He is ignoring all the rules and regulations. But when Mathur Babu went, he had some experience or the other which convinced him that whatever he was doing was perfect, because it came deep from the heart. It's not the outward manifestation, the performance of rituals to which most of the priests, the paid priests, because the more the rituals, the more they, you may say, they think it is a great worship that is going on. So rare rituals collecting that is also not sadhana. Mere physical mortification is not sadhana, nor is control of breath. In fact, he says, Swami Shardanji says, great teachers sometimes advise disturbed people, disturbed means mentally disturbed people, who are obsessed with evil impressions. You'll find a lot of them, that, oh, the vibrations of this place and evil impressions have affected me. That is why so many things are happening in my house. I have to remove those evil impressions and I'll have to do certain rituals, purification, then vastu. There are so many things which have been added that direction. So he says they're obsessed with this, with the feeling that they are getting these evil impressions are influencing their life and habits, and they perform certain practices to make these people calm and normal. He's speaking of some of the vidyas that were very much prevalent. Anything, instead of feeding that person who has a disturbed mind, all he needs is some sympathy and some nice food and some nice care and some love. Instead of that, they will take him to someone who will give all sorts of reasons why he is behaving this. Some spirit has attacked him, all these things, these evil impressions and habits, to perform some special practices. Obviously, they get money to make them calm and normal so that they can follow a spiritual path. So he said the erroneous conception of sadhana, you have to even remove these ideas. Some people, now he's telling, some people consider those prescribed disciplines to be sadhana and claim that they are suitable for every aspirant to practice, and they should practice. In addition, some people who are attached to these sense objects, transient sense objects of the world, make vain efforts under the erroneous notion that God can be controlled by some mantra or some particular rituals, like a snake that is charmed by a spell. So some people even believe that they can even control the Almighty, who is the controller of the whole universe. So it will not be out of place. He's now giving the reason why he's not just wasting our time and his time by discussing what sadhana is not. Because if you rule out these things, and wherever we see these practices being done in the name of spirituality, one has to be cautious. So he says it will not be out of place to discuss these truths of sadhana, what sadhana really is. What it is not, he gave in a very brief paragraph, but what it is. If we understand what it is, then the what it is not, we can ignore those things, even if they are happening in our society. And because what sadhana is been discovered by Indian sages through millennia of persistent effort. It's not that it was discovered just by chance. It is by trial and error, lot of practice. Even Buddha's life, if you see, he came in touch with some Sankhya gurus or some gurus who prescribed to him mortification of the flesh. So he stopped eating, stopped doing everything, and he was about to die. Fortunately, by divine grace, one young lady comes and gives him some payasam, and with that, after he consumes that, he regains his strength. Otherwise, nobody would have bothered. He would have died doing all these austerities. Then he found that my mental strength was becoming weak as a result of these strange practices which he was advised by some guru. He was in search of many gurus, and when he did that, he found that this is not the path. I should follow the middle path. Like Krishna says, don't fast too much, don't eat too much, don't sleep too much, don't sleep too less. So the Madhya Pantha, or the middle path, was what Buddha discovered. But then he had to experience the bad effects of some of the teachings which were based on erroneous concepts. Over. So, what is now the next paragraph, Swami Shardanji will not start this today, is based on the goal of sadhana. First, he wants to tell us what the goal is, then we can discuss how to reach that goal. If the goal itself is not clear, then there is no point in discussing what will be the result of this sadhana? What actually happens if you do sadhana? So he's quoting Sri Ramakrishna. He's not saying anything on his own. He says, the last word of sadhana, according to the master, means the goal of sadhana is to see Brahman or God, the all-pervading God in all beings. But that is the last word. At the culmination of sadhana, this is the ultimate goal. Maybe there are intermediate goals, but this is the ultimate goal. One reaches that plane. All the Vedas and Upanishads, the most authoritative Hindu scriptures support this statement. That's the only goal of life, whether you say it is God realization or experience of that one reality, which helps us to get rid of the ignorance which we have because of uncertainty. Today, somebody was asking in the morning, some Western people had come, they were asking about this uncertainty principle of Heisenberg, who, when he went deep into the structure of matter, when he went deep into the subatomic level, just wanted to find out what reality is. We see everything in the gross. We see so much of uncertainty, even in life. We cannot even tell what is going to happen after 1 hour. So there is so much of uncertainty. And being a student of, he had access to some of the Upanishadic wisdom, Heisenberg, because of Schopenhauer, who translated some of these Upanishads from Persian, from a Persian translation into German, his language. So from that translation, he got some ideas which he developed into the famous uncertainty principle, where he found that, really speaking, if you go deep into the microcosm, that is the quantum world, the position and the velocity, and it becomes so confusing that what we say as a certain amount of matter, mass in a microcosm, simply disappears. There's total chaos. There's no harmony seen at the micro world. Everything is moving in this direction, that direction. And then he was amazed at how, in such an uncertain situation, certainty is born out of such a, how can harmony be born in chaos? If the deeper we go into the microcosm, he found there's so much of uncertainty in that world. But though we say we are certain of certain things, that things will happen this way if we do this, if we do that, if we go to the right doctor, he will do everything. But still, even the most perfect doctor or perfect scientist cannot, they can just say it is probable. There is a probability element there. Nobody can say for certain that somebody will be cured or something will happen exactly in this way or that way. So this uncertainty principle is seen not only in the subatomic world, according to these quantum physicists, but also in the gross world that we see around us. Our lives are uncertain, our relationships are uncertain, societies, the flow of social societies' movements are uncertain. What will happen? When will a war break out? When will peace return? All these things are so uncertain. People can give you a statistical probability that this may happen if this happens, but they can't say for certain. So there is this element of probability. So the Upanishads say that having seen this uncertain world, as Bhagavan Sri Krishna says in the Gita, having come to this uncertain world, worship the only person, only thing that is certain, that is God. So that is the culmination, God or the perfect being or Brahman, which is the only thing which is certain, that awareness, that pure consciousness, which does not change. Everything else is subject to change, and change means sorrow, change means misery, change means death. So the problem of death, problem of transience is the only thing that can be solved, and seeing Brahman or God in all beings, in everything that we see around us, see that permanence or see that certainty in that uncertainty, uncertain world that we are living in, is the goal of sadhana. So what it means, we will discuss in the next class. What's the time?
41.
Yeah. We have prayer. If there is some question, you can ask. Yeah.
How to declutter our mind, just suggestion or keywords.
First, not to clutter it.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, before we declutter, we have to see that it is not cluttered further. So, there's the famous, I don't know what is his name. Yeah, Bernard Shaw, George Bernard Shaw. Somebody, he never liked to mix with people. He didn't like gossip. He said, I don't want to make my brain or my mind a dustbin of other people's gossips because I want to keep my mind clean. So that is how he expressed humorously. So that is one way is before we even start decluttering, Patanjali says, there's so much of clutter already there. So it's better not to add more. That is the first step. If we add more clutter, add more uncertainty, and try to deal with things which really do not concern us. There are many things which do not immediately concern us. They may concern us as we are part of a nation, we are part of society. There are many things which will affect us. But there are many things which really don't affect us. So we have to know to distinguish. That is known as viveka. So that is first is not cluttering the mind more. Now, how to deal with the mind which is already cluttered? Because it has been born with some kind of clutter or some kind of latent impressions of our, not only this life from childhood, but even previous lives. According to the Hindu philosophy, our karma we carry from birth to birth. So if we are born with a decluttered mind, it should be the result of many, many births of meditation and good thought. So if somebody is born with an uncluttered mind, he is very lucky. But it is very rare, as we have to unclutter. As Holy Mother said, she gave wonderful examples. Somebody told her that when I try to meditate, especially when I try to meditate deeply, so many evil thoughts, I feel that I was much better off before meditation, because after meditation, all the things which I thought I would never think, they come up. Why is that? So that disciple got panicky. So mother gave a wonderful example. He said, see, my child, you have been, that when you fly a kite, there's a reel. So in that reel, she says, you have rolled many threads of many colors. And you think but the colors which are inside are hidden. Only the outside color you are seeing. Maybe it is white. But when you remove those threads, you will find as you remove the white, the red one will come, blue one will come. Whatever one has rolled, it has to be unrolled. So meditation is something that helps us to unroll. So it is very natural that these different colors will come up. So one should not be afraid. She said, that doesn't mean you're not making progress. In fact, if you meditate seriously, and if the meditation is real, then the decluttering happens. And when the decluttering happens, your mind becomes restless. So that is a sign, one of the signs. Swami Sarvasthananda will discuss that it is only during serious sadhana that a person gets disturbed. So in the beginning, he has to endure that. Decluttering is not an easy process, because many things we have just pressed it down. They call it suppression. We have suppressed our old samskaras. They are not manifesting now, but Patanjali says they are not destroyed. Till we destroy, they have the potentiality. It's like not supplying water. You think the weeds will not grow, but the moment some water comes and sufficient light these weeds get, they start growing. They were practically dead, but they were not burnt. So we have to burn those samskaras, those thoughts, and even before they sprout or even before they clutter the mind. So one of the ways, as they say, is meditation and the repetition of japa, because the japa helps you to declutter the mind at the unconscious level. We are more worried about that. We are not worried about our situation around us. We are reading books. As long as we are in holy company, we find everything goes fine. Why do I need sadhana? But only when you try to declutter the mind by sadhana, these things come up. And then it becomes difficult. Or if we don't have patience, then people give up sadhana. Okay.
Do you have time for other questions?
There is? Yeah.
Was there knowledge of Upanishad and Jivan Muktas in other regions of
Yeah.
other than India?
Other than India, definitely there are. They are in different forms. If you read all the Bible and all the other things, if you read them in a very, very careful way, not many things in our Vedas, and they can be superficial. So we should not take all those things. Those which deal with knowledge, with mukti, with every religion, or at least most of the religions, believe in some kind of freedom. So whether you call it Jivan Mukta, that is the word you use, Buddha may use Nirvana, everyone has one problem: to solve the problem of life and death, to solve the problem of uncertainty, and to solve the problem of sorrow. So no religion was started or was inspired without these motives. Every one of the prophet came to save the world from what? From sorrow, from unhappiness, from uh, problems, from all the issues, from uncertainties, from the fear of uncertainties. Uncertainties by themselves are not bad. This whole universe is going on in an uncertain way, but Prakriti does the floods and the thunderstorms, and everything is uncertain, but nature is fine with that. But it's only when we get affected by this uncertainty and we start worrying, we become anxious, then the problems start, and then we need somebody to solve the problem. So these traditions are there. Mukti means what? You are asking of Jivan Mukti, other than the Upanishads. Everyone talks of the freedom of the soul, the freedom from suffering. That itself is Mukti.
Can regional samskaras increase the chance of moksha?
Hmm?
Regional samskaras
What is the reason?
means where you are born, sort of. If you are born in South India, India, China.
Oh, no.
regional
The
samskaras-
location, geographic location, normally they say, there is a very famous biologist who says 50% of our personality is nature, 50 is nurtured. How you are nurtured is only 50%. 50% you are already born with, whether you are born in a favorable family or the most unfavorable circumstance, it doesn't matter. 50% of course matters, because you find it difficult to practice sadhana if you are born in such a family. But born in a good family does not ensure. If your samskaras are basically bad, so that nature with which we are born is 50%. So it really should not matter where you are born, which country you live in, as long as you are born with good samskaras. You can be born in any part of the world and still make progress. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.